Magnolia McComish, and today on What's Cooking, I'm joined by Dr. Davidson of South Coast Health. And Dr. Davidson, what are we going to be cooking today?
We are going to make a tabbouleh salad with a vinaigrette that goes with the tabbouleh salad, or you can use the vinaigrette on its own on any sort of salad later.
Perfect. And before we get into the recipe, can you tell me a little bit about your role and what you do at South Coast Health?
Sure. I'm a non-invasive cardiologist at South Coast, which means that I take care of general hearts. So people with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, family history of coronary artery disease, you name it. And then I also do advanced imaging such as echocardiography and nuclear.
All right. And we're going to start with the vinaigrette today?
Sure.
All right.
So I brought a little sort of like a hand mixer. You can make this with a whisk in a bowl. It doesn't matter. There's nothing magical about this. I just like this because it makes a really thick and creamy vinaigrette. So I usually make a big batch of it at home and just put it in a little container so I can use it for salad kind of for the next week or two.
All right.
It's super simple. It's the basic recipe is 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard, and then 3 tablespoons of an acid, which can be any sort of vinegar, or you can use fruit juice like lemon, lime, grapefruit juice, orange juice, whatever you sort of like. I usually do a combination of some of those. And I brought a bunch today just to show you how many different options you have. This is not an endless, like an exhaustive list. I have red wine vinegar, champagne vinegar, balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, rice wine vinegar. There's white wine vinegar. This one is a champagne and orange vinegar. So you really have sort of an endless supply and options when you're making vinaigrette, so it's never really the exact same thing twice.
You can start getting really creative with it and spicing
100%.
as you see fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of this. So if you get sort of tired of the same dressing, you can make it with, you know, lemon or lime juice and just a splash of vinegar, or mostly vinegar. So, and you can add garlic if you like that, or different herbs. So you really can, the basic recipe can be changed and sort of adjusted as you go.
All right. Our water is boiling. We have 2 cups of water boiling, and
Awesome.
our base of the tabbouleh
We're going to use quinoa today, but you
Okay.
can use any whole grain you want. So you can use quinoa, farro, bulgur, any rice if you like that, or barley. I usually use bulgur, and that's kind of a traditional tabbouleh, but today we're going to do quinoa. You can find this in basically any grocery store, and it's super easy. It takes 15 minutes to cook. I'm going to use a cup of quinoa and about 2 cups of boiling water, and we're going to cook that for about 15 minutes. So we've got a boiling water here, and then you can turn the high boil down to a simmer, and we'll just cook that for 15 minutes, and then we'll be all set. And while she does that, I'm gonna work on the vinaigrette. So for a good size recipe, we're gonna do 4 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. And to be honest, the measurements it's not so important. I actually almost never use measuring cups. I sort of eyeball it.
I love every time we have a guest on the show, it's a debate of whether you measure or don't measure.
So
I'm glad we're doing a no measure recipe today.
Yeah, some things you really need to measure, like baking.
Oh, yeah.
It makes a big difference if you sort of like omit something, or you don't put the right proportions of things. It can be really problematic. Other things, it's sort of you can do to taste. So if you taste it and you taste it the way I make it, and you think, oh, that's got way too much Dijon mustard in it, use less. No big deal. So we're going to use a combination of lemon juice and champagne vinegar. So I'm going to use, the vinegar I'm going to use tablespoons, and this is a half tablespoon. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3.
And can you tell me a little bit about what flavor the champagne vinegar is going to bring opposed to one of your other vinegars?
Yeah, so this one, a champagne vinegar, is really nice and light. It's not very sweet. The apple cider vinegar is more sort of like a sweet base. The balsamic is much more sweet. But I like the champagne vinegar because it's sort of crisp and light and dry, so it makes a really nice dressing. So we did 2 tablespoons of the champagne vinegar, and then we're going to use 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And really, this is just this easy. So, and like I said, I don't usually bother measuring this out this carefully, but
yeah, a little less than half a lemon.
Yeah. And then I'm just gonna zap this all together to help sort of incorporate all this. And then next we're gonna add 2/3 of a cup of olive oil. And if you add this sort of more slowly and mix it up, it'll make it really creamy. And if you put it in the refrigerator, it'll sort of, or on the counter for that matter, it'll hold its consistency. It keeps on the counter for a couple days without any issues because there's not really anything in here that's going to go bad. But if you're going to use it within, a day or two, you can use it on the counter. Otherwise, just put it in the refrigerator in sort of like a little glass jar.
Like a dressing.
Yeah, exactly. So that was 1/3, and I'm going to put in my other third. And then I'm going to put a little salt and pepper in this, but for people that have high blood pressure or heart failure, they should avoid the salt, double the pepper, double anything you want. You can put garlic in here. But regardless, you don't really need a lot of salt. It's got a lot of flavor. And then put as much pepper as you like.
I like a good amount of pepper. So
I
if you
feel the
like
same
good pepper,
way.
we can add a little more.
All right. Well, it's a sign then. And the good news is when you're done with this recipe, like all recipes, you can always add more pepper to taste. So if some people really like pepper, have at it. And can you give me a little spoon?
Of course.
And we'll decide if this needs something else.
There you go.
Perfect. And I think that tastes pretty good.
I'm gonna try it also. That is good.
But feel free to put garlic in here. We're actually going to put shallot, which is sort of like a combination between red onion and garlic. I really like the flavor of it. A classic French dressing often will have shallot in it, so you can cut up a little shallot and blend it in there too.
I will say the olive oil flavor really comes through in that. So
yeah, so
like a specialty olive oil would be really good in there.
This is one of those times where using a high quality extra virgin olive oil is a must because the flavor is so forward.
Yeah. All right.
So we've got our vinaigrette made. So next thing we're gonna do is chop some shallot. Do you want to work on that?
Sure.
So we probably don't need this whole thing because it's so big, which is perfect. But why don't we use half of it and start with that. Right. So what you're gonna do is take the sort of paper off of it and you're gonna give it a pretty good mince. Doesn't need to be super fine, but you don't want like a giant chunk of shallot because it's a very strong flavor.
This whole thing?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Great.
And while Magnolia does that, I'm gonna work on chopping this red pepper. You can use any color pepper, anything that, red is really beautiful, so it contrasts nicely with all the green. So I think red's perfect. Red, orange, yellow, all of it is great. And anything that you're gonna cut, you're gonna sort of make into bite-sized pieces, something that you don't need a fork or a knife to break down.
And while we're cutting, Dr. Davidson, can you tell me a little bit about what a day looks like as a cardiologist?
Yeah, so I see patients in the office most days. I am in our Providence office 2 days a week, and then I am in our Fairhaven office 3 days a week. And I see patients kind of all day, new patients or follow-ups. Sometimes I see patients during testing, so I help sort of supervise some stress tests. And then I also, throughout the day, will read ECGs or echoes or nuclear stress tests or any other testing that I may have ordered.
And so what's going to bring a patient to you? Like, in what circumstance does someone know they need to go see a cardiologist?
So if you have a family history of coronary artery disease, someone's had a heart attack or has other sort of typical genetic things like the muscle of your heart is too thick, you should see a cardiologist. If you've got high blood pressure, you've got high cholesterol or funny rhythms, symptoms that you should see a cardiologist would be like chest pain, shortness of breath, palpitations, swelling in your ankles is a big one that people don't know about, but that can be a sign that something is going on in your heart. So
you'll probably be referred by your primary care doctor when
Yeah.
you go in with like, oh, there's something a little funky going on.
Yes, absolutely. And don't hesitate if you're a little nervous about something and you want to see a cardiologist, just mention it to your primary care doctor and they can tell you whether it's appropriate or not. There's a lot of basic cardiology that primary care doctors are very capable of managing: basic hypertension, high blood pressure, cholesterol. They're very confident and comfortable managing, but if something, you need more than one medication or you're having a lot of side effects or something else is going on, don't hesitate to ask to see a cardiologist.
I want you to know I'm not getting emotional. The shouts are starting to make my eyes sweat a little bit. I think while you're doing that, I'll start cutting the tomatoes.
Perfect.
All right.
So the tomatoes,
You don't mind?
same thing, maybe like, half of them.
All right.
And you're gonna try to cut them probably into quarters.
All right. So you started listing a little bit some examples of heart disease or things like that. Could you tell us a little bit more about, what those examples are and the impacts it might have on your life?
Absolutely. So a lot of cardiac disease people have at a younger age and don't necessarily know it. There aren't symptoms of high blood pressure, there aren't symptoms of high cholesterol until you're in trouble. If you're having symptoms, something has been going on for a long time. So sometimes you really don't know that you need a cardiologist unless you're seeing a primary care doctor. So it's really important to follow up sort of your basic routine health maintenance to make sure your blood pressure looks okay, make sure you're getting your labs checked. And those are sort of the best ways to know that you're staying on top of your overall health.
So this meal is part of the Mediterranean diet, which isn't a diet in the traditional sense where like you're monitoring what you're eating calorie by calorie. This is a genre of food that people eat.
Exactly. So, I think diets are terrible in general. So I love that you pointed out the Mediterranean diet's not really a diet. The important thing is whatever sort of eating pattern you're doing is something that you can sustain. So most diets are sort of weird, they have very specific rules, and they're really hard to follow over the long term. So those sort of diets generally are not very good for you because they're so hard to maintain.
Yeah, an unsustainable diet is never gonna help long term.
Right, absolutely. And also, you're still not learning how to eat properly, and you're not training your body sort of what it needs to grow and develop and maintain itself well. So the Mediterranean diet is really a lifestyle, and it's about eating more good stuff and less bad stuff. So it's sort of based on people that live in the Mediterranean, but there are other sort of, I don't know if you've heard of the term blue zones.
Yep, where people live longer.
Yeah, exactly. And they sort of all eat in a very similar way, which is loaded with fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes. So legumes are things like beans or lentils. And they have very little processed foods. And that's really kind of what the highlight of the Mediterranean diet is it trying to eat real foods and less not real food.
I lived in the south of Spain for a little while, and it was huge there. The Mediterranean diet, there's classes on it. It's really a part of the culture and the lifestyle to take
100%.
pride in eating healthy and fresh stuff from fresh markets and everything.
Yes, and they're very social. So part of, their diet culture is eating together, sharing a meal, and there's a lot of health benefits for that social support as well.
Yes.
So these are really wonderful things to share, and like you said, exactly, fresh foods from local sources are almost always the best.
Yes.
And so I am just ripping the thick stalks off the parsley. Really, this tabbouleh is so nice because you can use whatever you have in your refrigerator. So if you don't have parsley, I love parsley. I always have it in my refrigerator, but not a lot of people do. So if you don't have that, if you've got arugula, if you've got spinach, you've got lettuce, different herbs like mint, you can use whatever you like. There's nothing, that says you have to use parsley. I just really love how fresh it is, and it's just really delicious. So I'm just ripping the thick stems off the parsley because the thick stems are not so delicious.
Something that I'm finding while making this is a lot of these ingredients are things I'd get for other recipes and have leftover of, and they don't hold long. Like parsley you can't have in the fridge for more than a couple of days, a week maybe, but if you're making something with these and you have leftover, this is an easy way to use up.
That is perfect, and that is exactly what we do at home. When I have a bunch of hodgepodge vegetables and I don't know what to do with them, this is what we do, and I just throw whatever we've got. And you're also brilliant because you've put this parsley in water, and it's just like a flower or a plant. You just put it in some water and it'll help make it live a little longer. So you can cut the very ends off, put it in some fresh water, put it in your refrigerator, and it'll last, at least several days, if not a week or so, in water.
And I'll tell you, in some cases, if you leave it in there long enough, it'll start to root, and then you'll have
Yes,
unlimited
exactly.
at a certain
and then
point.
it'll start all over again. So all of that's a really great point, but I usually have most of the basics of these things, but if I don't have a pepper, I won't use a pepper. If I don't have tomatoes, I won't use tomatoes. If I have squash, like leftover cooked squash, that's something I throw in a lot. If you want to make this sort of more meal-like, you can absolutely use this as a meal, and in my family, we have it for lunch pretty frequently. But if you want it as a side, you can use it as a heavy side. If you wanted to make it sort of more meal-like, you can put like some cut up mozzarella, buffalo mozzarella, or feta or goat cheese. You could also grill some shrimp or put in some fish. This goes really kind of well with anything. And you can sort of tailor your vinaigrette towards whatever you're eating. So if you're eating something...
I was going to say, you could even marinate like a piece of chicken in the vinaigrette.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, grill up that chicken.
That's brilliant. And that's the way that the Mediterranean diet really comes together. You're thinking of like, how can I use all of these things together to incorporate them together? And it makes them really delicious.
All right. How am I looking on my tomatoes over here?
Is
this about enough?
Beautiful.
All right.
And... how's our quinoa coming? It's looking pretty good. Actually, it looks almost done.
We'll let that go just a little bit longer.
Yep.
And now we just need to cut the cucumber.
Yeah,
and we should be good.
How about, I'm going to give that to you since you did such a great job with the tomatoes. The cucumber, you can decide how you want to do it yourself. The hothouse cucumbers, you can eat the skin and it's not super tough, so you can leave it just the way it is. Or if you sort of, to make it more aesthetic looking, if you want to take a couple scrapes off of it just to sort of contrast the dark green with the light green, also fine. If you're using a regular traditional cucumber, the skin can be really thick.
Yeah.
So I tend to peel more of that, but this I sort of just do for the aesthetic. So you can do it however you like. And
we're going to use the whole cucumber?
Probably for the amount of, sure. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. So this is the beautiful thing. Like I said, it doesn't really matter, but if you want to, knock yourself out. And while you do that, I'm gonna chop up my parsley here. And I think I'm gonna turn the quinoa off, because I think we're about 15 minutes. And then I'm just gonna let it sit to cool down for a minute.
Yeah, we want it to not soak up to its full capacity, so that way some of that vinaigrette, the lemon juice all
absorbs into it. Yeah. Exactly. It'll make it really good. So I'm just sort of coarsely chopping this. And this is another thing. You can sort of do it to how you like. If you like it really thin, if you buy it in the store, the parsley is chopped very, very fine, and they use curly parsley. We're using flat parsley today. None of this matters. You can do whatever you like, and you can chop it as thickly or as finely as you like. But I'm going to give it a pretty good chop and try to pull out the thick stems. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and my 12-year-old does not care for the stems of the parsley.
You can't blame them.
Yep. So
with these cucumbers, you want them quartered.
Yeah,
or
so why
cut
don't we
thinner.
chop, I love this size, just put them into quarters.
No problem.
And I'm just going to use another little bunch of this parsley. If I can tear it off. My best laid plans here. So the vinaigrette that we use, like I said, you can use for any sort of salad. You can absolutely use it as a marinade. It's very versatile, and I think we sort of talked about how it's very easy to change and make things a little bit different to get lots of different uses out of them. You can do it with a whisk, and it won't be quite as creamy, but my aunt does it with a fork, and hers is super creamy, so she just depends on how much effort you put into.
Yeah. So what makes this meal specifically heart healthy?
This is loaded with everything that the Mediterranean diet is sort of based on. It's got lots of fresh vegetables and good greens with the parsley. It's also got a lot of, because of the olive oil. The olive oil is one of sort of the heart healthy fats. It's got a lot of omega-3s, omega-6s, whereas things like butter or the tropical oils like coconut oil have a lot more saturated fat. So those polyunsaturated fats are much more heart healthy. So things you want to avoid are saturated fats if you can, and trans fats, which are notoriously not so great for your heart. Ideally, in a perfect world, you're aiming to have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day.
That feels like a lot.
It is a lot. Sometimes it feels like a lot. But
So,
this is a great way to get a bunch of them. If you have a big bowl of tabbouleh, you've got at least 2 servings of fruits and vegetables. Same thing for a good salad.
So would like a clementine, that would be considered 1 serving?
Yeah.
All right.
And that's a great question, because if you look, not all clementines are made alike. A clementine and an orange, you can have a giant orange, which is more than 1 serving.
All right.
But a clementine pretty much is about a serving. A small apple is a serving. For greens, typically like a half a cup. So, sometimes it's not entirely clear what the serving is, but when in doubt, it'll have it written on it.
That's true.
So at this point, this has been setting for a little bit, so we're going to try to, and it's got absorbed all of the water, and it's still a little warm. And if you're not as patient, you can always put this in the refrigerator to let it cool down a little bit. We're just going to give it a minute to sort of cool down. And I'm just going to spread it out a little bit.
Yeah, we could put it in the fridge real quick while we finish up our chopping.
All right, perfect. Why don't we do that just for a minute? I gave you the little piece of shallot. It's not your fault. You did the best you could.
It can be deceiving.
Yeah. And sometimes when you take the outside sort of dried pieces off, it gets smaller and smaller. So the important thing, I think, with any of these vegetables, anything that you're not familiar with, if you're not used to cooking with a lot of these things, is be brave. Try something different. If a vegetable looks good, or if a vegetable's on sale at the grocery store, give it a shot. I mean, worst that can happen, you'd be like, oh, I hate that. I'm not eating that again. But sometimes you find something that you really love and you have no idea that you love.
I was excited to use shallots today because that's not something I get to cook with very often. Usually I go for the red or the white onion, but...
Yeah, anything that you cook onion and garlic with, you can do shallot instead. Traditional French cooking does a lot of cooking with shallots. I think they're very versatile. They're good for flavor as well as sort of anything else that an onion or garlic would be good for. So I think you can do no wrong when it comes to this stuff. And I think what we've imparted is do whatever vegetables you like, whatever greens you like. You sort of, none of this is, you can mess this up. This is 100% for you and how you like something.
All right.
So if you want to get the quinoa back out. I'm just zhuzhing my vinaigrette again. And so we are not going to use all of this, but we can always use more for...
So it looks like we did like a good coating.
Yeah, I'd say about a half of it, about a half of a cup. I may add some more depending on how it looks and how it tastes. but this is gonna kind of absorb some of this. And it's definitely still warm. You can, if you're inclined, you can always wait until this completely cools down. You can make the grain ahead of time. Or if you have quinoa that from the night before that you didn't finish all of and you just put it away, you can use that instead. That's totally fine. This is a great recipe, like you said, to use things that are left over.
Yep.
So I'm gonna throw my shallot in. You wanna throw your shallot in?
Yep.
It doesn't, it's all going
Yeah,
in
it's
the
all
same
going
place,
in together, so.
Yep. Just while it's a little bit warm, we're gonna. And if you feel like shallot or garlic or onion has too much bite, you can always cook this. If you saute it with a little olive oil, it takes some of the bite off of the onion. And then we're just gonna chuck everything else. You can put your tomatoes and cucumbers. I'm putting my pepper and my parsley in here. Awesome. Nice job chopping.
Thank you. All right, we should be good.
Great. All right, and then I think you can probably appreciate how colorful this is.
Yeah.
Which is really what's so cool about the Mediterranean diet is if you are willing to be a little bit brave, it's beautiful. There's lots of great colors. It's very, aesthetically pleasing in addition to being delicious.
Yes.
And I think we are going to add a little more vinaigrette.
And it's exciting shopping for groceries and thinking what's going to make my meal more beautiful. And
Yeah,
not
you
just more
mentioned that.
delicious.
That was brilliant.
It's a nice mindset to have at the grocery store.
Yeah, so when Magnolia was shopping, she said she was looking at the tomatoes and trying to pick out which ones would be the most beautiful, and she did. She picked the perfect ones. And I'm just gonna put a little more vinaigrette, and if people like it sort of vinaigrette-y, you can always add more at the end. And you can salt and pepper this to taste as well. All right, so we're gonna get some bowls. If this is inspiring to you, there's really simple things you can do to sort of make you overall more heart healthy. The most important thing is if you smoke, to quit. So cardiovascular disease, one of the worst things you can do is to smoke. You think of smoking as being a lung problem. It can be, but it's really a cardiovascular problem. So quitting smoking, managing chronic conditions. So if you have high blood pressure or cholesterol, talking to your doctor about that, working on eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, exercising 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise a week. A walk is perfect. You don't have to be a gym rat to do this. A walk 20 to 30 minutes a day is perfection. The other thing you could do is 75 minutes a week of more intense exercise. Then making sure you're getting enough sleep, 7 to 8 hours a night for most people is what most people need. And then if you can, work on stress reduction. So obviously this is something that we all face. But if you can work on these dietary changes, your exercise, getting more sleep, that can also reduce a lot of stress. So all of these things really work synergistically together to overall decrease your cardiovascular risk. Everyone should be working on trying to incorporate more of these things into their life. And I hope you enjoy this.
All right. It's very fresh. I would almost put a squeeze of lemon over the whole bowl.
Good news, we've got plenty.
It's very good. Thank you. Heart health can be easy and delicious.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Davidson, for coming on today, making this delicious, heart-healthy meal with me. Where can people go to learn more?
If you want to learn more, you can go to www.southcoast.org.
All right, and that's where you'll find different doctors, some different tips and tricks to maintain a heart-healthy and generally healthy life overall. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.